we actually align modernity with pluralism. I think that's the big category mistake. Peter Berger, who's the great sort of sociologist of religion, you know, who one time was a big supporter of the secularization thesis, arguably the most sort of, you know, the biggest proponent of it. When he switched and suddenly said, look, actually pluralism is the modern thing, I think that's it. And that's what's the core of why we think an American model, loosely termed, is sweeping the world. People are choosing which religion to have. They're doing the same thing as Thomas Jefferson did. You know, they're looking at the Bible and cutting out the bits they don't like. They're saying, I want this, and I want this, and I'm going to change this. It's a much more individual thing. And the reason why that is relevant to politics and public life is if people are choosing their religion rather than just inheriting it, then that means that when they go into the voting booth, they go into work even, they're not going to leave it at home in the same way as they might have done before. It's the forces of progress that are driving it. You look at globalization, you look at technology, you look at a lot of democracy. You know, you're giving these, when you give people the vote, strangely, a lot of religious people go and vote for religious parties. When you give people technology, strangely, it's the people who actually use it best are often people like the mega churches. They're very, very quick onto this. If you look at the way that, that globalization spreads, I think globalization actually encourages the demand for religion in two ways. There's one group of people who think we want religion to be a sort of storm shelter. And you can see that quite a lot of that, particularly in the Islamic world, but you can also see it in rural Arkansas or rural India. You can see these people who think, the world's out there, it's a frightening, difficult place, and religion is a form of protection against it. By contrast, what we also identified, which I think is the sort of unappreciated bit, is that for lots of people, lots of up-and-coming people, you know, visit the mega churches of America, you don't see poor, downtrodden people there. You see smart, young suburbanites. They see this as a way to get ahead of other people. Very, very true in China, very, very true in Korea, very true in Latin America, where you see Pentecostalism spreading very quickly. And the one exception is Europe, which we can sort of come back to, which is a harder case to make this argument. But in all other areas of the world, for better or worse, you know, those things are being allied. And actually it's going with a, if that's the sort of demand side, that there's a sort of deeper demand side, is actually, whether we like it or not, man seems to be a theotropic beast. You know, given the option to believe in God or some kind of afterlife or some kind of meaning, they will do so. And if you want the quintessential example of the sort of modern religion, it's your president. You know, look at Barack Obama. There is a man whose life was, he wasn't sure about it. He found meaning in a Chicago church. And what's interesting about Obama, I think, is that he is somebody who, once you take him onto the international stage, which he's obviously already on, but once you put that particular element of faith on the international stage, I think you're going to see a very different reaction to American religion than you had with George W. Bush. George W. Bush typified all the things that Europeans in particular found suspicious and wrong about American religion. He seemed very hard, very intolerant. It wasn't the same thing, but I think a lot of Europeans could identify with this clever, young, well-educated man looking for something more to life and discovering it in the church. I don't think it's any accident at all that the best-selling religious book is called The Purpose-Driven Life. That's the bit which is striking a chord with globalization. So that's all the demand side. That's why people are going for it. And you know, there's just one last thing on it. There is now quite a lot of science, again, for better or worse, which shows that religious people are wealthier, healthier, and happier than non-religious people. So to that extent, it, quote unquote, works. And you know, Dawkins is very interesting on that. But the other thing which is driving religion, if that's the demand side, is supply. And you have the spread of American-style competitive religion, where you make great efforts to make religion much easier. You make churches more comfortable, you use every form of modern technology, you embed it into people's lives. And you see that spreading into other religions like Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam as well. And you see it spreading around the world. That's a very good question. That is the area where God is back is the hardest argument to prove. That said, I think on one side, it's clear. The extent there are two parts of this book. One is saying, here is the politics, they're going to be involving religion, and then there's also the basic fact of people perhaps becoming more religious generally. On the first bit, that works completely with Europe. I think political Europe has suddenly got religion back into the public square in a way that people, I thought, just assume they banished it. That's partly because of the arrival of Islam in a big way. Suddenly, you know, it's a big part of domestic politics in a variety of European countries, Sharia, headscarves, where exactly the line between mosque and state should be, what children should be taught, whether religious schools are a good idea or a bad idea. These are all issues which are suddenly floating back to the centre. You also see it, I think, a degree amongst the leaders. You have Blair, who famously said, we don't do God, or rather his spokesman did. You know, Blair is now running a faith and politics institute. You have Gordon Brown, again, sort of quite a religiously inspired figure. Sarkozy wrote a book about it. You see the influence of all the East European countries. So within the political world, I have no doubt that the same kind of culture wars and stuff which have been part of the American world are going to be part of the European world in a different way, but certainly in a way that Europeans just never imagined possible. Whenever they've looked at American politics, it's always been the bit where they thought that's an abomination, it's not going to come here. Well, it is. So politics, yes, you know, God is very much back in European politics. The difficult bit is God is back in terms of personal religiosity. There, I think the evidence is much more mixed. On the one hand, church attendance generally in most places, or the mainline churches, are still going down. Against that, I think you could argue that on the edge, things are beginning to happen. You can see Pentecostalism growing very fast in France. You can see, if you go to the East End of London, you see a multitude of different religions competing. 2 million Britons have been through something called the Alpha course, which is a sort of, I mean, I'm going to simplify massively, but a bit like the version of the purpose-driven life. You know, there's a degree of change there, which just shows things are going. Adult confirmations is another change. Childhood confirmations going down. Adult ones, i.e. people older suddenly deciding I want to commit myself to the Anglican Church or whatever. Those are actually going up. My guess is, over time, the same sort of forces which have been at work in America, as the European religious market gets sort of freer and easier and more competitive, they will work, i.e. that if you are a suburbanite in Bordeaux or Birmingham, England, you will have some of the same kind of reasons to drift towards religion, the same sort of search for meaning, the same, in some cases, the same degree of sport, storm shelter. All those things will combine in the same way as they do in Birmingham, Alabama, or wherever. There is too much similarity there for it not to swing back a bit. But no, we're not predicting that you know, we're going to reach a stage, or certainly at any time soon, where 76% of Europeans immediately identify themselves as Christian.